I recently was up in Trail, Madam Speaker, and I met with some workers that worked in the smelter up in Trail, and I think there are about 36 of them that have active cases. I think 35 now, one just passed away. Some of them are spending their last years of their lives in extreme pain and extreme agony.
My name is Doug Jones. I'm the president of Local 480, the United Steelworkers in Trail. The following video is a testimony from only a small portion of BC. Asbestos exposures are relevant all through BC. They're in factories, in schools, hospitals, ferries, shipyards, and all through the building trades. This issue is something that should concern all of us here in BC.
Asbestos was a miracle ore that was pulled from the ground that was found to be fire protective or preventive. It's used in brake shoe linings. It's used in boilers. It was used as sort of this preventative new formula for preventing fires, and it's used in shingles in old houses. It was used in lots of different applications. What has happened over the years is many workers have become exposed to it and exposed to high degrees of it.
Especially in the carpenter shop, I cut the asbestos came like a 4x8 sheets of plywood. And I made the insulating blocks for the old malting room. And cutting this material on the saw, lots of dust.
Up there were quite a mess, but we got into a lot of stuff I guess we shouldn't have.
And those were to go between
the bus bars in the malting room.
Right.
Those blocks was the form of insulating blocks, they call. So the bars will not burn each other.
Yeah.
So you had to make those blocks, they had to be made precise so they would fit.
Some of those buildings up there were from the original ones. We were tearing down and redoing. So you didn't really know what you were getting into. But we got into it. It had to be done.
I had some pretty dirty jobs, factory truck and water blasting. And then of course sweeping the streets and stuff. You're always eating all the dust and stuff off the streets.
And how long did you do that particular job for?
Oh, about 2-3 times a month. And because when they needed it, they put an order in and we had to do it, and I was the one doing it.
Yeah. And over how many years?
Oh, 20 years.
20 years, yeah.
What asbestos does is it cuts the linings, it cuts the lungs into small scars into the lungs. The scar tissue heals, which causes a contracting of the lungs, which gives you less lung capacity and damages the air sacs in the lungs. So it's a very painful death. And when you get cancer from asbestos, mesothelioma, it's an extremely painful and it's a terminal disease. There's no cure for it.
I've been diagnosed now with asbestosis. I never had a problem with it before, and until I had a problem with other things, they did a CAT scan and they found it.
I didn't know what was causing it, but I thought after I retired there that I would get a little bit heavier on the middle. I should do some jogging, so I tried to do that, and in about a minute I was right out of breath. But we discovered it kind of accidentally, my doctor and I. Took some x-rays and finally said there's something we don't like about pictures of your lungs. So you better do a CAT scan, which we did.
I'm not sure what it's called, but it's like part of a cap that grows over the lung.
Asbestos in Kameko, all their pipes that had that white covering was nothing but asbestos, which was a form of silicosis. And the people that pulled that stuff off all came down with asbestos. And it was a hematoma of the lung, which is what we called it, because it was a cancer of the membranes of the lung tissue itself. Not of the lung, but of the lung tissue.
I was diagnosed with asbestosis in my lungs. I have on both sides, but my left side is worse than the right side. And I go to Kelowna every 6-7 weeks for treatment.
I could feel something coming on because I was getting short of breath no matter what I was doing, but I didn't know what it was until I had x-rays taken.
And how's this changed your retirement?
Oh. Instead of going out doing stuff, you're sitting at home all the time. You can't leave the house. Can't pack nothing. You can't walk, 100 yards and you're shot. But before my younger days, you're hunting and fishing on the go all the time, and you can't do that no more.
Now, I can't do much anymore. There's nothing they can do about it, really. I used to play, last year I played golf and every day of the week, Monday to Friday, all year, never missed a day. This year I hit 10 golf balls and had to quit because I didn't have the strength and or the ambition to really do it. And there's lots of stuff. My hunting, I won't be able to go out this year. It's too dangerous. I get out there and something happens. It just puts too much pressure on the other guys, so I got to stay home. I got a wife that's quadriplegic, actually. I have to look after her, and it makes it hard when you run out of breath and you can't breathe. You got to sit down and rest all the time.
That affected me, plus my wife being disabled a little bit. I couldn't help her as much as I should have, so.
The way I'm wasting away, I've lost about 50 pounds in the last 4 months. You're trying to figure out what's wrong, but I think it's just the lungs are shot.
But I've went through chemo, which is a real drag on your system. I like going to hockey games, watching hockey in winter. Well, last winter I couldn't leave the house because of chemo, because when you're on chemo you can't associate with other people. You pick up germs that real easy and you have no defense. And it's just really threw a screw into the whole system.
They inject some stuff inside on my left side because they freeze this side, which will help the pain.
It doesn't help you breathe, but it helps the pain.
It helps the pain. And when the medication wears out, you have to go back again. And I don't know how long I can do this.
Yeah.
It's getting harder and harder as the time goes on.
Yeah. And your quality of life?
The quality of life is not good because you live with asbestos. You worry. You worry interferes with your sleep. You get up at 2-3 times a night. You're short of breath, and you go for a walk. You go up the hill. You have to stop, sit down. It's not good.
No, very difficult.
Very difficult to deal with. And I noticed with me is the time is going since '93. It's worse.
So it's an extremely toxic, dangerous material that needs to be eradicated, and it needs to be taken out of the stream. Modern technology has certainly replaced asbestos with other formulas that are equally as good in fire retardant and fire prevention, and that's the direction that we need to go. So many workers in industry then and today are still being exposed to it. Some by accident will come by asbestos, not understanding that it's asbestos, and will be exposed to it. A lot of workplaces have been tested and have been found to have high degrees of asbestos in there because of insulation that has broken loose and broken open, and the particulates will float through the air.
It became apparent to both the company and the union that asbestos was going to be a problem, and that we should be doing something about it. So with that, the safety committee delegated myself and Ike Bossy, my partner, to do a catalog all uses of asbestos, and We identified with the company what we were doing. At that time, we started cataloging all the uses and applications of asbestos. We started up in Warfield, and we got about 2/3 of the way through the plant when Kenny Giorgetti and Guy Downey called us in, and we had a meeting with the company, and they put together an asbestos removal program at Cominco. Worked in concert with each other. In fact, put together how we were going to do it and who was going to do it, and they established an asbestos removal crew. It was very proactive. We should say that at that point in time, I took an industrial hygiene course through the WCB, and asbestos was high on their agenda of removal. So that's one of the issues that got us to identify the uses at Cominco, and ultimately the removal of it all.
My name is Gordon Manalaz. I'm the Health and Safety Chair for Local 480 of the United Steelworkers based here in Trail. One of the biggest problems I see with our asbestos program is the amount of exposures we continue to have on our property. This is not a problem that developed 50 years ago and we've gotten rid of it and now we're having lung problems or lung diseases. It's a problem that is ongoing on our property as well. In my opinion, we haven't done a very good job of managing our asbestos program. Up until now, we've sort of adopted a program of just to fix and not remove. And in my opinion, we need to donate more personnel to our asbestos program. We need to donate more money to our asbestos program. We need to take on a program that removes all the asbestos and gets rid of it off our property. I think that's the only way that we'll be able to stop our exposures. We've had upwards of 50 exposures so far this year due to asbestos. It is not a problem that's going to go away. So I hope that this company will realize that it's a serious problem, not only with pensioners of the past, but for current employees. And our current employees with these asbestos exposures are going to have significant problems somewhere down the line.
And now to see, you know, a man in his 50s with a young family and grandchildren, and to see what he has to go through just to walk somewhere, just to get by, and the pain that he suffers. It's a terrible exposure. It's one that doesn't need to happen. It's one that needs to be addressed by governments. It's one that needs to be addressed by underwriters, including workers' compensation and WorkSafe. And it's one that can be eradicated. It takes an effort. It's going to cost some money. But at the end of the day, the cost to humanity and the cost to society on just the quality of life that you're going to give to people who should be gardening and playing with their grandchildren, and instead they're debilitated, they can't breathe, they're coughing, they're bringing up fluids, including blood from their lungs, and it's a very sad exposure to the families and to the people themselves and to the grandchildren that no longer have the quality of life with their grandparents because of it.
And Linda, you were married to Buddy, obviously.
Yes.
Who at what point did Buddy did you find out that he had an asbestos-related disease?
It was June of '97.
Okay, and how long were you together before that?
We were married in '81.
In '81, okay. And how did that affect things? I mean, obviously once you found out.
I think the most difficult part was telling the kids.
Mm-hmm.
That was the hardest.
Yeah.
Because how do you tell your kids their dad's going to die? You know, and we had to tell them. You can't not, you know, tell them the truth.
Mm-hmm. He was how old again when he was diagnosed?
50.
50 years old. From the time he was diagnosed until things really got serious.
When he passed away, you mean?
Yeah.
He passed away in 2000, so 3 years.
3 years.
Mm-hmm.
3 years, and that quality of life was absolutely horrible. I would imagine.
Actually, once he had his surgery done, he was good for maybe a year and a half, and he was really good. But then the shortness of breath started and everything else. So he had good quality once he had the surgery, but I mean, it wasn't a guarantee. You're just getting extra time, that was it. Sent over to Kelowna, they did a biopsy, and that was the result of the biopsy.
Okay, and that was mesothelioma?
Yes.
Okay.
We got a Christmas card at Christmas addressed to Bud, which I absolutely flipped out on after he passed away. So I had to do some detective work to find out who sent it. So that was upsetting for me. But the reason I did it was because I didn't want somebody else to have to go through the same thing, because it's very upsetting that somebody that you worked for wouldn't know that.
Yeah, after all those years. That you know what, that just is incredible to me that
It
they would
is.
do that.
It is. And it's not a big, we were not in a big town. I had got, you know, Gail Heslop. She came with me when we had to sign papers and everything to Kaminko. And one of the papers was that I had to sign was saying that Kaminko was not responsible for what had happened to him. And I looked at them and I said, you gotta be kidding me. I have to sign that piece of paper saying that you guys didn't do this? I would not sign. They said, well, then we have to hold his last paycheck. I said, you can have his last paycheck, I don't care. But I will not sign that piece of paper.
That's incredible.
It is
That
incredible.
Absolutely incredible.
And they'll deny it, I'm sure.
Yeah.
They'll deny it. But that's the honest to goodness truth. Because Gail was with me and she says, well, maybe you should sign. I said, I'm not signing. For what? When it's a lie. You know, it's... You know, like, I mean, these are good people. They worked hard for the company to get it where it is now, and you're just abandoning them. I just don't get it. I don't get how they're...
It's just not right. It's absolutely not right. That this can happen and there's no compensation, there's no accountability. Someone has to be accountable.
I say when I first started up there was construction. Then I ended up on tramming. And then I ended up, I laid off a little bit there. Back on Scotty Ross's gang or whatever. Into the cinder plant. And a lot of asbestos in there. He's sheeting all over there where the old pecs were and everything else. And from there, down the furnaces. Got laid off a few times. Went back on labor gang. Tramming back to the furnaces. And tapped a little bit. Worked the old lead well because I was still just a young guy. And they had their furnace men and all that there. But everywhere you went, there was asbestos sheets 4 feet wide. You need a chunk.
There's a lab in Vancouver that they send the specimens to that said that it was definitely malignant mesothelioma, which is somewhat different from just asbestosis, as they call it. This is a cancer that is on the outside of the lung, and
well, it penetrated probably.
It is definitely from having worked with asbestos. His right lung right now is collapsed. It's not functioning. He's been through chemo. He's been through some radiation. I think that really hurts everybody, you know, that as a family, it affects all of you as a family. But interestingly, he's just come to basically a halt now. He's having pain, he's on morphine, he's on painkillers, and his activity basically is going for a ride or coming out to the garden, and he's on his oxygen pretty well 24 hours. When it came down to compensation, they said that there was legislation out there that tied their hands and he would not be able to get compensation. They are paying his medical, but we already have medical. But accountability and responsibility to his shortened life and his quality of life and the family. We did appeal the fact that they said they couldn't give compensation, and they said their hands were tied because of the legislation that Premier Campbell's government, my premier, had introduced. And so I then wrote a letter to Premier Campbell and I received a letter back from Olga Illich, the labor minister, saying that she had looked into WCB and that they were paying for our medical expenses, and she was very sorry for his condition, and I believe her. I'm sure she, feels sympathy, but that really isn't compensation.
I mean, you can see he still had pipes back then.
Oh, yeah.
From twists and wrenches all those years. I mean, I always remember he was
strong.
a strong boy.
Yeah, for someone who's never smoked a day in his life, I mean.
Thelioma doesn't show up until you're retired.
Yeah.
But they all agree that it's a work-related injury. They actually state that in letters, that this is a very devastating work-related injury. So then my question comes around, gee, have we been talking to the wrong people, like talking to the labor minister and talking to WCB? If their hands are tied by the legislation and they're saying that this is all there is to offer, then do you go to the company? Is she sort of in a backward way saying to me, WCB can't take care of this because there is this legislation? Then do you talk to the company, because somebody has to be accountable? They're calling it a devastating work-related illness. And if it was work-related and he was sent to those places to work in those hazardous conditions, and this is the result, then should there not be some compensation for this?
Over the past 5 years, we've seen an increase in asbestos-related disease, and we know that that's going to increase. These are cases that we know of.
They seem to have taken the compensation out of workers' compensation when they've gone to WorkSafe BC. And that is a travesty, and it's something that needs to be corrected. And it needs to be looked at that this is about these men, their families, their children, their grandchildren, and their families' futures. And it's a sad situation that we just can't tolerate in this province.
The people that worked at Tech Cominco and were exposed to asbestos, some of them are spending their last breaths fighting a system when they should be spending their retirement with some dignity with their grandchildren and gardening. And so it's very sad that the employers are getting a holiday from this exposure and the workers are spending their last days fighting it in pain and agony, and that has to change.
I can't understand how a company that, is supposed to look after your employees would do this to somebody, and their families. What they're going through is very difficult, and they have no idea what it's like to watch somebody die.
And what do you see for your future, Dale?
What future?
I just hope that I hope I have a few more years left. I don't know, but
And I ask us all to think about what we've seen here and what people have said, and we need to all work together to make sure that this doesn't happen again.
Asbestos has now been dubbed one of the worst industrial mistakes of the 20th century, and it remains the #1 occupational killer in BC.
And it's about time the governments of the world realize that these people acquire a disability pension from the work they did.
I will go wherever you lead me, on rivers of roses or rain. I will follow the signs that you leave me, the mysteries of joy and of pain. I will search for light in the darkness, though I stumble through shadow and shade. Oh, if you are with me, of whom shall I be afraid? Oh, if you are with me, of whom shall I be afraid? Whom shall I be afraid now? when I've fallen, driven the ghost from my door. You have comforted me in my sorrow, wiped my brow when I've been sick and sore. You have shared in all of my triumphs and blessed the crops that we laid. Oh, if you are with me, of whom shall I be afraid? Oh, if you are with me, of whom shall I be afraid? Whom shall I be afraid? Whom shall I be afraid? I have wondered at your sacrifice as I stood at the gates of dawn, just to love one another. That was your advice, and that keeps me moving on. It keeps me moving on. Yeah, yeah.